A WHRO investigation found the fired leader of Norfolk's housing authority authorized millions of dollars in no-bid contracts usually reserved for serious emergencies. At least $1 million worth went to contractors with personal ties to him and his top deputies. I'm Ryan Murphy. This is WHRO News. When Nathan Sims arrived at NRHA late in 2023, Kathy Mosley says he seemed like a breath of fresh air. Sims ran housing agencies in Maryland, Georgia, and Washington, D.C.
He seemed to know what was in need for the agency and where we were going.
Mosley was NRHA's procurement director, handling contracts, and had been there for more than 20 years. Soon after his arrival, Sims ordered Mosley to put together paperwork to hire some consultants. Usually, NRHA would have publicly advertised that it needed to hire someone, then let contractors submit proposals and pick the best one. The majority of government contracts are handled this way to maximize competition and limit corruption. Instead, Mosley says Sims handed her contact information for specific consultants and told her to draw up what are called sole source contracts.
I sat down and, he'd want to do contracts that he's going through his little phone, and he had contact numbers, and I needed scopes of work. I didn't know what these people were doing. And, one of the things that it's almost like you're writing your own ticket, because now I got to reach out. What do you want this person to do?
This worried Mosley. She knew those kinds of no-bid contracts are rarely used and come with significant requirements. But Mosley says she did what she was told and made the contracts work because she feared for her job.
It was clear with Nathan that if you really didn't play the game, he was not going to hold on to you.
When she did begin pushing back in 2024, Mosley says she was moved out of the procurement office. On Valentine's Day 2025, her supervisor told her she was being laid off. Several NRHA contracts issued under Sims's leadership and reviewed by WHRO violated state procurement law. They also violated Norfolk's own policies and guidance from the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development. For instance, Virginia law says anytime an agency issues a sole source contract, it has to write a justification explaining why it couldn't go through the standard public purchasing process. Some NRHA contracts didn't have justifications at all. The justifications WHRO did review all claimed an emergency need to immediately hire these contractors. NRHA policy says emergency contracts are reserved for when life, limb, or property are in peril. But Sims used them to hire contractors to provide advice on NRHA's policies, issuing bonds, and, quote, independent research and analysis of housing programs.
Emergency is not a synonym for convenience.
That's Bill Kovacic, a procurement expert from George Washington University Law School. He says sole source contracts are sometimes unavoidable, like when the heat goes out in public housing during a cold snap. But Kovacic says repeated long-term use of no-bid contracts and consistently ignoring state, local, and federal rules should have raised red flags for the agency's board. Beyond those violations, WHRO used online records to uncover personal and business connections between Sims, executives he hired at NRHA, and at least 4 contractors who got no-bid contracts. They include former employees and co-workers at other housing authorities, and one man who ran a private business with NRHA's former chief operating officer.
It's cronyism and familiarity, which is bad not just because it diminishes the value that's being obtained for the expenditures, it corrodes the civic trust.
NRHA commissioners say Sims and his deputies kept them in the dark and didn't report any sole source contracts to the board. Documents show NRHA issued at least 30 such contracts after Sims took over. In October 2025, commissioners started asking Sims about no-bid contracts and ordered one contract halted. It's not clear what prompted the move. Emails obtained by WHRO show Sims wasn't giving board members the information they'd asked for.
Morning, everyone, friends, residents, commissioners, also NRHA.
By November, the board's patience had run out.
In open session?
I'd like to make a motion that we terminate our executive director.
After firing Sims, Norfolk's board brought in longtime NRHA executive Michael Clark to clean up the mess. Clark declined to speak with WHRO, citing an ongoing internal investigation that he indicated could yet uncover criminal activities. Since Clark took over, NRHA's top ranks have been purged of the associates Sims hired, and several contracts have been terminated. The agency created an office to enforce regulatory compliance, and the board commissioned an outside audit. WHRO has not been able to speak with Sims since his firing. He's been hired to lead another housing authority, this time in Charleston, South Carolina. Ryan Murphy, WHRO News. Freelance reporter Jim Morrison contributed to this story.